till the judgment day. There is a river that flows by this city, and how appropriate it is that we Progressive Baptists come to this city that is situated on that river. For we, without apology, are a people committed to the process of proclaiming and performing God's work of redemption and liberation. New Orleans is, in a real sense, a microcosm of all that negatively impacts the lives of black people. A little over a decade ago, the worst storm in American history, Katrina, a kind of Noah's flood, hit this city. The levees broke and washed away the homes and the hopes of its people. The Lower Ward 9, which was predominantly occupied by black people, to this very day has not been restored. Their homes have not been rebuilt, their businesses have not been reestablished, their schools have not been resurrected. And isn't that in microcosm a picture of black life in America today? Here in New Orleans, the Ninth Ward is a symbol of how America feels about black people in general. The Ninth Ward could be the name of the neighborhood you call home. Poor housing and poor schools and no jobs. Here in Louisiana, a proud, avowed Klansman is running for the Senate, and he has the support of one of the presidential candidates. This presidential candidate is always calling President Obama incompetent, but he, like the rest of his party, don't want to give him credit for the wonderful things he has done. Affordable health care, snatching the economy back from the brink of the worst depression in American history, creating millions of jobs. What if Congress had just worked with him? Then what a different nation this might be tonight. After the attack on so many black lives last year, we thought we had reached a point of civility. But just a few weeks ago, right here in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, just an hour or so from where we are, a white police officer shot and killed Alton Sterling at the point-blank range while he was already pinned to the ground. Hours after that, it was Philando Castile in Minnesota. It just lets us know that the terror of police brutality is not over. Last year at this time, we were in the aftershock of rioting in the streets. And this year, right in Dallas, Michael Johnson and Gavin Long in Baton Rouge tried to avenge the loss of the lives of these young black men by murdering white police officers. And let there be no doubt about it, my brothers and sisters, we do not condone violence and we do not condone retaliation. That's a fool's solution to our problem. We are the convention of Martin King and of men and women who changed the world through nonviolent sit-ins, nonviolent marches, and nonviolent protests. We have to let our sons and our brothers know that violence is not the way. We don't want to declare war on police. We need to police. We want to declare war on police brutality. Our hearts and prayers go out to all of the victims of this senseless violence, including the families of the police officers. But in the midst of it all, we are not going to lose our focus. We're going to continue to speak up and to speak out against police brutality, and we're going to speak out against unnecessary police violence. We're going to stand up and we're going to stand with Black Lives Matter. We're not going to let their message and their work be minimized and scandalized and denigrated and misrepresented by the Rudy Giulianis of this world. Black lives have never mattered to him and his kind, and we don't expect that they ever will matter to him. But black lives do matter to us. And as a church, we have to reach out to them and we have to listen to them and we have to hope that they will listen to us as we seek to give them a biblical and theological foundation and justification for the justice work that they do. As a church, we need them and they need us. A little more than a year ago, I set before you what I called the progressive factor. It is the idea that if in coalition with other groups, we could get at least 1 million new persons registered and get them to the polls to vote, then we can make the difference in the outcome of this election. Our social justice agenda still is to get the Voting Rights Act restored. But in order to do that, we have begun by engaging our churches in an intense voter education, registration, and voter mobilization campaign. We had wonderful workshops to equip our pastors and churches this week on how to set up voter registration committees in their church and how to engage their communities. This is the most important election we will participate in our lifetime, and we have a little more than 80 days to wake up and get serious and get involved. We do our forebears a grave disservice by taking for granted what they gave their lives to make possible for us, and we do our posterity a grave disservice by leaving it up to them to fight battles that we ought to already have settled. So if you've ever had any doubt in your mind about the relevance and the need for a progressive convention, then this current social and political atmosphere ought to dispel all of your doubt. As long as racism exists, then there will be a need for a progressive. And as long as injustice exists anywhere, then there will be a need for a progressive. As long as one soul is unsaved, then there will be a need for a progressive. And I implore you, and especially our young pastors, to pick up the mantle of the progressive cause. The progressive cause is the gospel cause. All of us are just following a young, radical preacher who challenged all earthly systems to practice love and compassion, to feed the hungry instead of blaming the victim, to clothe the naked, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God and set the captive free. And now I have a text message from heaven that I want to download into your spirits. In the book of Exodus, chapter 2, and verses 11 through 15, and it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and he looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brothers. And he looked this way, and he looked that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy brother? And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared, and he said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and he dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. And I want to talk with you now for a few moments about the Moses predicament. In his edifying book entitled Experiencing God, William Blackaby points out that one of the ways God speaks to us is through the circumstances and the events of our lives. As obvious as it might seem, this is an insightful and important piece of information because most of us are so busy living that we don't have the time or we don't take the time to reflect upon the events of our lives for the specific purpose of listening for the still small voice of God. For us, events are things that happen to us. For us, events are things we live through. For us, events are things that happen around us. For us, events are things that go down in the world. But seldom, if ever, do we see or think of the events of our lives as a medium that God chooses to deliver an important message to us. A careful review of the divine human encounter as it is sketched out upon the sacred pages of the blessed Bible will reveal to us that circumstances and events are one of the main ways God has always communicated with his people. He spoke to Abraham through the voice of an angel. He spoke to Moses through a burning bush. He spoke to Balaam through a talking donkey. He spoke to Ezekiel through a valley of dry bones. Events are not just happenings and experiences that take place in a vacuum, disconnected from the larger reality of our lives. There are not a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. Events are the medium that God uses to concretize his message in the day-to-day experiences of our lives. That being the case, there is no spiritually sensitive soul who can reflect upon the events of the past couple of years without recognizing that God has been talking to us. There's been a series of historical events which, taken singularly or collectively, comprise an Instagram postmarked in eternity, sealed with the stamp of the omnipotent God, and containing an important message from God that we can't afford to ignore. To the spiritually sensitive soul, the past couple of years have been a kind of deja vu. We have seen the 50th anniversary of the murder of Medgar Evers, who was simply trying to get people registered to vote. We have seen the 50th year of the March on Washington and Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. We have seen the 50th year of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge that eventuated into the Voting Rights Act, and we could go on and on. You can cut it up, you can splice it up, you can dice it up, you can look at it from any angle you choose, but there is no denying the fact that God is talking to us. Taken singularly or collectively, these are not events we can afford to ignore. These are not events we can casually pass through. These are not events we can dismiss with an apathetic sigh and a nonchalant shrug of the shoulders. These are important events, regnant with such meaning and freighted with such seriousness that they ought to cause us to freeze in our tracks, to take a good, long, honest look at ourselves, and cause us to purpose in our hearts to turn our lives around. When we reflect upon these events and consider the sacrifices that a previous generation has made for us, then a blush of shame ought to settle over our spirits. They sacrificed so we could have access and opportunity. We're selfish and self-centered. They denied themselves so that we could have. We're pampered and spoiled. They conquered personal and systemic challenges. We're crybabies and we give up. They found meaning and purpose by living for a cause larger than themselves. Our cause is us. God was real to them. We're playing church. They came to church to have their faith affirmed and their souls infused with the courage to face the meanness of another Monday morning. In these days, if we come to church at all, we're coming to be entertained. And as a consequence, we are sleepwalking through an important period in our lives when we're about to lose the very rights and privileges that they laid down their lives to make possible for us. This is what God is trying to show us in the anniversary of these events. He's trying to give us a panoramic view of where we've been, a telescopic view of what we've been through, a beatific view of what he's done for us, and a sobering view of our responsibility to be vigilant and faithful to the struggles of the past. God is trying to tell us it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. It's time to stop playing, and it's time to come home. There's a very real sense in which it can be said that this is a prodigal generation. We have left our spiritual home. We have rejected God and his will for our lives. We have abandoned the church, and we've rebelled against the very values and principles that made us who we are and got us to where we are. This is a prodigal generation. This is a generation that wants to praise, but we don't want to protest. We want God to prosper us, but we don't want to commit ourselves to his will. We want God to open up the windows of heaven and pour us out a blessing we have not room enough to receive, but we don't want the responsibility of living God's word. But they go together, my brothers and sisters. Praise and protest go together. This is the genius of black religion. Our mothers and fathers praise God for life. They praise God from whom all blessings flow, but they protested wrong and they protested injustice so they could see his will done on earth as it is in heaven. In this generation, we have so spiritualized our faith that it's almost no earthly good. We're praising, but we're not voting. We're doing the holy dance, but we're dropping out of school. We're speaking in tongues, but we're killing each other. there's a disconnect between the faith we profess and the concrete experiences of our lives. Praise and protest go together. I know we sing that song, "Don't wait till the battle is over, shout now." But quite frankly, it doesn't matter when you shout or if you shout. The important thing is to not forget that there's a battle going on, and the battle ain't over yet. We have forgotten that we're engaged in spiritual warfare, and you just can't shout and praise your way through all of this mess. You can't afford to go to sleep on this high-tech battlefield. We have to be prepared to fight. We got to fight to pull our families back together. We got to fight for quality education for our children. We got to fight for a living wage for the underemployed. We got to fight for the resurrection of our neighborhoods. In fact, the very issues that they fought to make available to us are the same issues we have to fight to hold on to. Our problem is that we thought we had arrived. I don't know where we thought we were going, but for some reason we thought we had arrived. We benefited from the sacrifices they made for us, and we thought the battle had been fought and the victory won forever. We got a little degree and start getting a check every 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we denied our history and start acting like we were in the promised land. And yet while we parted, our enemies plotted. We thought we were too cute to protest, and now when we look up and look around, we're almost in a worse predicament than when we started out. I'm trying to tell you that it's time to come home. It's time to come back to God, come back to the church, come back to each other, come back to the values that got us to where we are and who made us who we are. You can say what you will or may, but the greatest problem that still hinders and hampers our progress as a people is the fact that racism is one of the founding principles of this nation. From the days of our youth, we're indoctrinated to believe that this is a God-loving and a God-fearing nation where we practice liberty and justice for all. But historically, we have not experienced liberty without limitations, and to this very day, we still find it hard to receive justice. It's still okay for a white police officer to murder an unarmed black man and face no consequences. It's still okay for white charter school management companies to pimp black children. It's still okay for the Supreme Court to deny us the right to vote. So much for a post-racial society, so much for thinking we have arrived. Any way you look at it, racism is still alive and well, and undermining our hopes and aspirations. Racism is a demonic ideology. As the late Dr. William A. Jones used to put it, racism is based on a perverted theology that justifies a false anthropology that creates a sick sociology. In other words, racism says it's okay to practice discrimination and segregation and all of the rest of it because black people are inferior and God made them that way. A sick sociology based on a false anthropology spawned from a perverted theology. But if the Bible is not clear about anything else, it is clear about the fact that God has made of one blood all nations. If the Bible is not clear about anything else, it is clear that all of us are made in the image of God. Fighting injustice has always been the mission of the black church, and it still is our continuing struggle. But the problem is that even as we try to fight, we got some enemies on the inside that we've got to fight at the same time. We have turned on each other. We got too many preachers fighting preachers. We got too many members looking for their own turf and own space. We got too many black folk who think they white folks. See, our problem is, how do we stop fighting each other and join forces to fight our common enemy? This is the situation that we have on our hands, and this is what I call the Moses predicament. Well, all of us will know the story of Moses. We know that he was born to an humble Hebrew couple enslaved in Egypt, And concerned that Egypt was turning too brown and the Egyptians would soon be a minority, Pharaoh implemented a genocidal policy that said all male babies 3 years and younger had to be killed. Vernon John says that when the midwives told Moses' mother what the law said, she said, well, damn the law, I want my baby. And we need somebody, we need some parents, we need some churches, we need some institutions, we need somebody that will defy the odds in order to save our children. Our children got a rough road ahead. Our children don't know what it means to be black in America. The world is no longer just black and white. Our children are in competition with every nationality on this globe. We need to defy the odds in order to save our children, because you don't ever know when you got a deliberator on your hands. Well, Moses' mother defied the odds. When she couldn't hide him anymore, she put him in a basket and sent him down the river, praying all the way that the snakes and alligators wouldn't eat him up. And as fate would have it, Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the Nile when Moses' mobile bed floated by. She took the infant Moses, and again, as fate would have it, God gave him to his birth mother to rear. Look at God. Don't you see how God works? You may not see a way out, but God always has a way. God always has a plan. Pharaoh can make his plans, but God can derail Pharaoh's plans. Just when you look and think that it's the worst, then that's when God steps in. His birth mother reared him. Pharaoh's daughter wouldn't breastfeed him, but Moses' mama breastfed him. And it was something in that milk that had the nutrients of liberation in it. Pharaoh's daughter sent him to school by day to learn Egyptian history and Egyptian culture. But when he finished all of that, his mama took him to night school, where he learned the real story. In night school, he learned about the God of his people. In night school, he learned about the God of justice. In night school, he learned how we got over. His mama took him to night school, and the word is that when he was grown up, when he had become a man, when he could critique the culture for himself, he looked on the burdens of his people. And that's what we need, my brothers and sisters. Instead of us trying to live in palaces like we some Egyptian prince, we need somebody to not just be a burden, but to look on the burdens of our people. See how we're struggling. See how we're working hard and getting further behind. See how we're losing ground instead of gaining ground. Moses looked on the burden of his people, and he became an active participant in trying to dismantle an oppressive system. He saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, and it hit his moral nerve. And he killed the Egyptian, and he buried him in the sand. But when he went out the next day, he saw a Hebrew strike a Hebrew, and his own brother turned on him. And that's our predicament in this day. How do we get to the point where we stop fighting each other long enough to join together in fighting our common enemy? That's the Moses predicament. And in order to get through this period, we got to do what Moses did. Now come here and observe the text. And first of all, it teaches us that we've got to come to the rescue of our people. See, when Moses saw this Egyptian strike his Hebrew brother, he was filled with righteous indignation. He saw the burden the Egyptians imposed on his people, how they were enslaved, how they were forced to make brick without straw, how they were forced to do the impossible with no resources. And Moses knew that was wrong. And so when he saw this Egyptian strike the Hebrew, he had had enough, and he came to his brother's rescue. He killed the Egyptian, and he buried him in the sand. What Moses was doing here was not advocating murder so much as he was coming to the rescue of his people by attacking an unjust system. And that's the prophet's responsibility. You're not around here to look and act like you some kind of a thug or a pimp. You're here on a rescue mission. And yet in the face of this predicament, there are too many of us who are at ease in Zion. Some of us don't think about anybody except ourselves. Some of us have become so comfortable that we don't speak out against anything. We have lowered our voices in order to save our lifestyle. But God needs somebody who will come to the rescue. God needs somebody who will be a voice for the voiceless, who will be hope for the hopeless, who will be a light in the darkness. God needs somebody who will come to the rescue. We can't sit on the sidelines and ignore what's happening to us and around us. We've got to come to the rescue and speak out against a system that dehumanizes us and depersonalizes us and to thingify us. Yet in the midst of all of the assaults on our humanity, the attacks on our dignity, too many of us ain't saying nothing. We have lost our prophetic voice. The church is on a rescue mission. The church is on a rescue mission to set the captive free. But in these days and in these times, the church has taken off the whole armor and slipped on an evening gown and gone as the world's escort to the devil's ball. We have been captured by the culture. Listen, this ain't no time to be sitting on the sidelines. This is a time to lift up your voice. This ain't no time to be sitting and trying to act cute and be and praise with nothing in it. This is a time to come to the rescue and show up and stand up and speak up. What if Moses had just looked at this incident and did nothing? What if he had just looked at the other way? What if he had decided that he was going to enjoy the comforts of Pharaoh's house and forget about his own people? But no, he knew wrong when he saw it, and so he came to the rescue. And that's what our foremothers and forefathers did. They fought the system to make it possible for us to have a better way of life. Ours is a history of fighting against the system to make life better for everybody. And God needs somebody who will come to the rescue, who will speak out against a system that would deny us our humanity, deny us the right to vote, and deny us all of the privileges that God has set before us. You know, that was an old song we used to sing, and we don't sing some of them old songs anymore, but some of them old songs was pretty good songs. And one of them old songs used to say, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can just cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can just show somebody where he's going wrong, then my living will not be in vain. My living will not be in vain. If I can wipe tears from a baby's face, if I can help an aging saint remember the lines of Amazing Grace, if I can show some lost person how to find their place, then my living will not be in vain. God needs somebody who will come to the rescue. The second lesson this text teaches us is to think us and not I. Now, in the course of fighting against an unjust system, Moses killed an Egyptian for striking his Hebrew brother. He came to his brother's rescue. But when he went out the next day, he saw a Hebrew fighting a Hebrew. Here he was trying to rescue his brother from a system that was oppressing both of them. But while he was fighting the system, they were fighting each other. Moses was thinking us, while his Hebrew brother was thinking I. And the problem is that too many of us who are just thinking about ourselves and our own comfort rather than realizing that we in this thing together. You can say what you will or may, but you ain't no better off than I am, because we in this thing together. When the Egyptians disrespect you, they disrespect me also. When the Egyptians call you the N-word, they call me also. When the Egyptian takes away your right to vote, they take away my right also. See, this is why it doesn't pay for us to fight each other, because when it's all said and done, we're in this thing together. See, this is what Moses was trying to get across to his Hebrew brother. He said to him, why are you fighting your brother? See, this question was intended to snap him out of a spirit of rage and humanize him. This man is your brother. Now, I know we don't think like that anymore, I'm old school, and see, when I came through, we used to call each other brother. What's happening, brother? And we had an elaborate handshake in order to seal our sense of brotherhood. We used to respect our women. We said to our women, my beautiful black sister. Now it's my nigga and my hoe. But listen, we need to think us and not I. See, it's easy to get caught up in just thinking I. See, I got to look out for myself. I got to make it for myself. The world programs us to think I. But I don't care who you are, you can't make it by yourself. You're not big enough. You're not bad enough. You ain't got enough. You won't live long enough to make this journey by yourself. I don't care if you do think you all of that in a bag of chips and the dip chips in. You can't make it by yourself. You ain't that bad. If nothing else, somewhere, someday, sometime, you gonna need somebody. If nothing else, you gonna need a mortician and somebody to think up a eulogistic lie and somebody to carry you to yonder's grave. But before you get out of this world, you gonna need somebody. See, we need to think us and not I. See, that's how our forefathers and foremothers made it. See, they were thinking us and not I. See, we say, I got mine, you get yours. They said, if I got something, you got something. See, when they stood up against injustice, they weren't just standing up for themselves, they were standing up for us. When they knelt to pray, they weren't just praying for themselves, they were praying for us. We can't buy into this ungodly Egyptian ideology of rugged individualism. That's how the Egyptians divide and conquer us. That's how they dupe some of us into believing that for one reason or another, we better than the rest of us. See, right now we got a whole lot of smart, well-educated black people. They done fool around here and suddenly got so smart they no longer see the necessity of calling themselves black. They right-wing Republican. They made it because of affirmative action. Now all of a sudden they've been to all these Egyptian schools and they want to turn around and burn the bridge down for everybody else. What happened to Ben Carson? You know, it just goes to show you you can be a neurologist and an idiot at the same time. See, they going around trying to tell everybody they pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Fool, no, you did not. You got to jar your memory. Don't you remember we didn't have no boots? Listen, boots are a luxury. Listen, we were so poor we didn't have no shoes. Only shoes we had were the one we get in church and sing about. When I get to heaven, gonna put on my shoes because I sure ain't got none down here. Listen, somebody prayed for you. Somebody worked for you. Somebody sacrificed for you. Somebody bled for you. Somebody died for you. You can't make it by yourself. We got to think us and not I. See, that's our predicament. That's our predicament. Too many of us are just thinking about ourselves when we need to think us and not I. Listen, we got to stand together. We got to walk together. We got to serve God together. We got to fight this battle together. We got to think us and not I. Don't fool around here taking the blessings of the Lord for granted, walking around here and forget how you got to where you are. Your education, yeah, education is good, but education didn't get us to where we are. It's nice to have money. You got to make money, have money to make it, but money didn't get us to where we are. Don't be walking around here getting no amnesia. You know how we got to where we are. We come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. Hey, 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 he never failed me yet. Think us and not I. But see here in the second instance, that this text teaches us to put yourself in a position to be used by God. See, now Moses, he fought the system because it dehumanized his people. But he found himself in a predicament when he tried to stop his own people from dehumanizing each other. he asked the Hebrew, why are you fighting your brother? He was trying to get him to focus on their common enemy. But the man shot back at Moses, who made you a prince and a judge over me? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian? You ain't no better than I am. You just a Hebrew just like I am. Moses panicked. He thought nobody had seen him do it, but God took notice. When Moses killed that Egyptian, God got excited on his throne in glory and said to the angels, you keep your eyes on that man, because I can use a man like that. And the word got out, and Pharaoh put a price on Moses' head. And from that day forward, Moses became a wanted man. He was wanted not just by Pharaoh, but now he was wanted also by God. Moses was a fugitive. He ran to the backside of the wilderness. And the word is that he sat down by a well. This is not a passive sitting. To sit down by a well was the place of repose and of reflection and a place of contemplation. Moses sat down by a well. This was a defining moment when Moses had to decide what he was going to do with the rest of his life. He ran from Pharaoh, but he ran into God. He sat down by a well to refresh his weary spirit. He sat down by a well to ease his troubled mind. He was trying to hide, but he could not hide from God. All he ended up doing was to put himself in a position to be used by God. And while Moses sat there by that well with his future on his mind, God showed up in a burning bush and said, Moses, you just go tell Pharaoh I said to let my people go. And if they ask you who sent you, just give them my calling card. Tell them I am sent you. Tell them I am that I am sent you. Tell them I am life. I am life in all of its totality. I am the beginning, and I'm the middle and the end. You tell them that's who sent you. You tell them I'm twitching in your eyelids, that I'm air in your lungs, I'm dexterity in your hand, I'm swiftness in your foot. If you got joy in your heart, that's me. If you got clapping in your hands, that's me. If you feel the spirit moving, that's me. I'm God all by myself. You tell him I am sent you. God changed Moses from a fugitive to a prophet of justice. And God is calling somebody who will speak truth to power. God is calling somebody who will rescue the perishing. God is calling somebody to set the captive free. Moses had a predicament on his hands. But the problem is he could not straighten it out. He got them out of Egypt, but he couldn't get to Egypt out of them. No man could do it. Joshua tried it, but Joshua couldn't do it. He got them to the promised land, and they got to the promised land and forgot about justice and start thinking about prosperity. The prophets, they couldn't do it. Nobody wanted to hear a convicting word from the Lord. No man could do it. And so God got frustrated on his throne. I saw him when he took off his starry diadem, took off his royal robe, stepped out of immortality, slipped on mortality, said goodbye to the angels. I'll see you in 33 years. I'm on my way to be born in Bethlehem. And he came down through 42 generations, born in Bethlehem, reared in Nazareth, preached in Galilee, betrayed in Jerusalem, hung up on Calvary, buried on Friday, but got up on Sunday with all power in his hand. He's got the power to see us through. He's got the power to make a way out of no way. He's got the power to turn this thing around. And it doesn't matter who gets to the White House. He's still on the throne. God can do it. If any man will be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things are passed away, and behold, All things have become new. I got a new way of talking. I got a new way of serving. I got a new way of praising. Hey, hey, hey. Since Jesus came into my heart, we got to keep on fighting. I know it's a tough time, but God is able. I know it looks dark, but God is able. And we have to remember that we are soldiers in the army. We have to fight. Although we have to cry, we've got to hold up the blood-stained banner. We've got to hold it up until we die. Harder yet may be the fight, and right may often yield to might. Wickedness a while may reign. Satan's cause may seem to gain. But there is a God. I said there is a God. There is a God who rules above with hand of power and heart of love. If I'm right, he'll fight my battle. If I stand still, he'll fight my battle. If I trust him, he'll fight my battle. If I serve him, he'll fight my battle. Say yes. Yes. Fight on, progressive. Fight on, progressive. Serve on, progressive. He will. He will. He'll fight your battle. And one of these old days, you'll hear his voice. Say, servant, well done. Well done. Well done. You fought a good fight. You kept the faith. Well done. Yeah. Can I get a witness? Won't he fight your battle? Say yes. Yes. Hallelujah. Yes. Yeah! Oh yeah! He'll fight your battle. He'll make your way. Yes, he will. Hey, hey. Yes, he will.
Doors of the church are open.